Hey everyone, Tim here, and I'm putting this short video together actually from my hotel room in Virginia. I'm in Virginia. I'm going to be officiating a wedding tomorrow, but I got a question from a friend, and I wanted to dig into it and give this friend a response. But I thought, I'm going to make a video just to put out there because this may be helpful to other people who are maybe thinking about this question or who have had somebody else ask them this type of question. The question that came to my friend was basically this: Your God forgives the most heinous things. And the subtext was basically like, that's sort of why I don't want to be, at least part of the reason why I don't want to be involved with him. Your God forgives such terrible, horrible things. I don't want to be connected to that type of God. And so how do we think about that? What do we do with that question? So I want to offer you, I think I've got 5 or 6 different points here I want to make. So number one is when we say that a particular action is forgivable or not forgivable, i.e., it's too evil or it's not that evil, we're assuming some sort of sense of justice and righteousness and morality. And I would say, yes, I agree. There are certain things in the world that are right and that are wrong, and I long for justice and I long for things to be righteous and good and as they should be. I think it's important to note here that if you operate from a naturalistic framework saying there is no supernatural being, there is no God, we are just the product of random evolution and chance, we're meat robots, as they say, if all we are is highly evolved animals, then the whole idea of justice, righteousness, and morality goes out the window. We do not judge a Nile crocodile for grabbing a hold of a wildebeest, drowning it, and then eating it. We don't say that that's an immoral thing. We might not like to watch it, but it's not a question of morality. It's just a question of that's what happens in the natural world. And if we're just animals, then any activity that I carry out that is a manifestation of my power, it's just me being an animal. So if you're a naturalist, the idea of positing some sort of morality just doesn't work. And it's not just Christians or religious people who are saying this. Naturalists and atheists who really think about this would agree with this idea. Richard Dawkins himself says that we're just dancing to our DNA. Right? There is no sense of morality. It's all just random chance that we came together and we'll all die someday, and that's the end of it. So assuming that something is not forgivable is the subtext, the content below the surface is saying that the person who's assuming that is saying there's a right and then there's a wrong, there's forgivable, there's not forgivable, there's evil and there's good. So just realize that even asking the question assumes some sort of moral stance. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that it becomes a very slippery slope if let's just pick on me, if I'm the one who determines what is forgivable and what is not. And the reason it's dangerous is for a couple different reasons. Or the reasons it's dangerous are for the following reasons. One is, who am I to be the judge of all these things, right? That's the first question. Do I have a full sense of justice and righteousness in the world enough to say this is right and this is wrong, and I'm the ultimate judge? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't things that aren't right and wrong. There are certain things that are right. There are certain things that are wrong. But to say I'm going to be the judge of it puts a lot of power into my hands. The other danger of this is that if it's all up to us as individuals, then power will win the day. This is Friedrich Nietzsche's Superman, that it's all about exerting our power in the world. And so let's say there's something I do that I don't think is a big deal, but somebody else who is in power thinks what I'm doing is really wrong, then they can overpower me, they can put me in jail, they can punish me, whatever, because they have power. And so just us randomly saying, I get to pick, or you get to pick, or whoever gets to pick what is right and wrong, it's a slippery slope that we might head down. Now, I want to say again, this is not saying that there aren't certain things that we just all look, or the vast majority of people look and say, that's not okay. But we need to be careful what the implications might be. Here's the third thing. When we look at a particular activity and say, that is unforgivable, what it does is, now we're going to a Christian worldview here, is it diminishes the grandness of humanity's sin against God. And by that I mean our rejection of God, our rejection of his love, our rejection of his truth and direction in our lives. That is a huge evil that we have, human beings, every one of us in some way have carried out against God. And so when I look at horizontal injustice, it's always going to be smaller than the vertical injustice that I've carried out against God. Now again, that's from a Christian worldview, but when we say like that's not forgivable, but the way I've acted toward God is, obviously that becomes a challenge in the Christian worldview. The next thing I would say is this. Forgiveness, this is really, really important. Forgiveness is not saying that a particular behavior or activity was okay. That's really, really important. Fundamentally, forgiveness assumes that what was done was not okay. Let me explain this. If someone does something to me for which I do not need to forgive them, someone brings me a sandwich and gives me a sandwich and I enjoy the sandwich, no one would look and say, Tim, you need to forgive that person. They wouldn't, because nothing was done that was wrong. You don't forgive somebody unless they fundamentally have done something wrong. So the very nature of what forgiveness is acknowledging that something has been done that is incorrect or immoral. That's what forgiveness is. But forgiveness is not saying it's no big deal. It's acknowledging that evil was carried out. It's acknowledging that something evil or immoral happened. And now the question is, what do we do about that? How do we respond to that, right? Forgiveness is not saying it was okay. Forgiveness is not saying it's no big deal. It's actually the opposite. It's saying it is a big deal. It wasn't okay. And forgiveness is the choice. When we look at the Christian worldview, forgiveness is the choice that God said, though you're guilty of things, I'm not going to hold you fully responsible for those particular things. Now that's in the cosmic sense, right, with Christianity. You can still forgive someone and they can still face the consequences of the evil that's been carried out. Right? Somebody could mug me in an alleyway. The police catch them and they put them in jail, and I could go visit them in jail and say, I forgive you. But the police might still say, we're still keeping this person in jail because they've proved themselves that they're a criminal and they have to be punished for it. So I can still forgive and that person can still be punished, right? So we just need to remember that that's the case. Forgiveness doesn't mean that it's okay, and forgiveness also doesn't mean that you get off scot-free all the time and that there's no consequences. Even if that person was forgiven by me, the law still says that you have to pay something for it, right? This is true, again, in the Christian worldview. When God forgives me for the things I've done wrong toward him or toward others, he's not saying it's no big deal. He's saying it is a huge deal. And as a matter of fact, I need to have justice carried out for that. And instead of me being punished for that evil, Jesus Christ steps in and he's punished for the evil instead of me being punished. And he fully takes the consequence of the punishment of the sin instead of me being punished for the sin. That's really important for us to understand. Forgiveness is not saying it's not a big deal. It's saying it is a big deal, and justice has to be carried out in some way. Just a couple more ideas. I want to note, just on a kind of emotional, existential level, that when somebody has been wronged and then they are forgiven by the person who has been wronged, if that is true forgiveness that's offered, it's a pretty phenomenal thing to watch. I was thinking the other day about the Larry Nassar case, this physician, I think at the University of Michigan State he was at, I believe. And he was sexually abusing all these gymnasts who were under his tutelage. Now, I need you to hear me very clearly. What he did was heinous and completely immoral. And I would not go to any of those gymnasts and say, here's what you need to do, here's your response. That's not I would not put myself in that role and that authority. What I can tell you is that one of the women, as she read her comments to him in the sentencing case, or in the trial, she talked about the evil that had been carried out by him, and she basically said, I'm not going to hold this against you. I'm not going to hold on to the wickedness that you perpetrated on me. I'm going to forgive. There was something about that moment that most people would look and say, there's something phenomenal about what's going on here. You may not like it. You may not necessarily even resonate with it so much, but there's something that's phenomenal about that. It makes you go, what? I have to think about this. Something similar happened in the case, if you remember, a police officer, I believe it was in Texas. It was definitely in the South somewhere. But she came home from work late at night and she went into the wrong apartment. And when she walked into the apartment, there was someone else in there. She drew her weapon and killed the man, not realizing she was in the wrong apartment. When she was on trial, the brother of the man who was killed said that he forgave her and then asked the judge, is it okay if I give her a hug? And he got out of the witness stand and went over and gave this police officer a hug. People looked at that and said, I'm confused by this level of kindness and forgiveness that's being offered. There's something about that when we see forgiveness at that level that it just shakes us to our core. And I think we need to think about that. What is it about that we look and we say, that shakes me inside? And I think part of it is us saying, wow, what would it be like to be in a place where I could actually love and forgive and have kindness towards a person who did something terrible against people I love or against somebody I love? Again, not saying it wasn't wrong, but to move to the place of saying I'm going to forgive them nonetheless. The last thing I'll say is this. I was thinking about this the other day. When you read through the Bible, the number of people who, despite their evil actions, God uses and finds a way to bring redemption to their life is pretty phenomenal. Think about the fact that you have Peter denying Jesus and Jesus eventually being crucified, and that one who denied Jesus during the worst moment of his life becomes this leader in the church. Think about the fact that King David was guilty of adultery and he was guilty of murder, and God still used him. Think about the fact that the Apostle Paul was murdering the early Christians, and then he came to faith in Christ and then became this bulwark, this amazing apostle for the Christian faith. Nobody is beyond reaching. That's really important to remember. Nobody is beyond reaching. And it is not, I want to say one final thing, which is that it is not an easy thing to forgive all the time. Somebody, takes 50 cents from me without asking me, okay, it's 50 cents. Somebody takes $10,000 from me, that's going to be a little bit harder for me to forgive that person. Forgiveness is not a polemic. It's not I forgive or I don't forgive. It's a journey of maybe I'm in a place of not forgiveness now, and I'm journeying toward the place of actually saying I want to get to the place where I can truly forgive this person. That's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. So I just wanted to throw these out again because this question that came in I think is a really good one. Like, what do we do when we see somebody commit horrible atrocities and say, is it possible that God, I don't like the idea that someone says, I don't like the idea that God could forgive that person. That's a real existential struggle. I think it's a good thing for people to wrestle with. And I hope eventually it would press somebody back to the place of saying, you know what, in light of that question, I need to think about how much do I personally need to be forgiven? Because if I listed all the things in my life that were not just bad, but really bad or terrible, that list could overwhelm me quickly. And the grace of the Christian message is that God, while he hates the evil that I carry out, has offered me forgiveness from those things. That's the center of the Christian message. So there's some food for thought on the topic of forgiveness. Hope everyone is doing well. And thanks for checking out this video, all right? Take care, everybody.